Joy, you've worn blackface because he's an outspoken guy.
Listen, this is not a MAGA rally, okay?
All right, well, there you have it. This is not a MAGA rally. In this clip, you're going to see Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg absolutely lose it when a few people in their crowd clap when Donald Trump says some things that they don't support. Now, I watched this 20-minute clip of The View in 2x speed. Highly suggest nobody does that, and you don't have to do it because I'm going to show you the highlights in this. But more importantly, at the end, Don Trump Jr. uses a social strategy where he calls out a few things in the past of Behar and Whoopi Goldberg as a social maneuver. So I'm going to show you what happens to this, but also break down the social maneuver so you can understand what's going on. So let's start this clip here.
If we're going to have the conversation about the outrage about whistleblowers, you work with CBS stuff. You work with CBS to out a whistleblower who came up with a story that's kind of shady.
This is not CBS.
No, but you work with them. That broke this morning.
All right, Don Jr. used two techniques right there. Did you catch either of them? One was very simple, and one is actually very advanced. So the first one was just that he continued talking while Whoopi tried to talk over him. In any interaction, when somebody successfully stops you from speaking by talking over you, they display higher status. They came in and had the authority to get you to stop. Now, in an interaction like this, when a lot of people are talking over people, you're going to have that happen. But the difference is if you actually have something to say, a point to finish, and you let someone talk over you, it looks very weak. If you're just trailing out, maybe you're repeating yourself and you were done anyway, it's a little bit different. But you heard Don there continue to talk with authority, and he wasn't backing off. He even stopped and said no for a minute to let her know that he wasn't going to be talked over. Now, the second thing was more subtle. So Whoopi was not only trying to talk over him, but get his attention by talking over him. So what Don Trump Jr. did was he addressed Behar to the right after he was done talking. So it's like two different times that you're not respecting Whoopi Goldberg for trying to get the attention. Number one, you're just talking over. Number two, you're having a side conversation. And what it does is it forced her to continue to repeat herself. And every time a person repeats themselves, trying to get the attention of the other person, they are actually losing status. So the more that goes on, their status drops, even when they inevitably get the floor. It's something that's very advanced, but something that was used right here.
What she asked in the question, just because if we start getting off on 50,
See, by the time she gets the floor, she's lost so much of her momentum or gusto versus if she would have been able to talk over Don Trump and stop him right there and then go into hers, she would have had a lot of momentum and her point would have landed with a lot more power and impact.
It's out there. I read it in an article. I've been reading it for a week. I saw it on the Drudge Report. Like, this is not some secret, but to then say, because it's Donald Trump Jr., because he's an outspoken guy,
not a MAGA rally,
why was there no outrage?
Okay, did you see that right there? That is very telling. Didn't that seem kind of weird and out of place?
Listen, this is not a MAGA rally, okay?
Why was there no...
She says this is not a MAGA rally because people clapped when Don said his piece. So they obviously have fans of Don Trump in the crowd, right? But they're so used to having such a one-sided crowd that, listen to, I'll play it back. Not that many people clap, but when they do, it's so surprising to Behar that she has to actually stop and address it. And Whoopi Goldberg does this later in the clip too. They've never had a crowd that's not completely biased to their side. And I think that's probably normal on shows like this, the old home field advantage, but it's funny to see how much it bothers them that they have to call it out multiple times because it throws them off so much.
I read it in an article. I've been reading it for a week. I saw it on the Drudge Report. Like, this is not some secret, but to then say, because it's Donald Trump Jr., because he's an outspoken guy,
not a MAGA rally,
It's not a very big clap. It's like 3 people clapping and she loses it.
By a vicious left that's running a one-sided chant thing. By Adam Schiff, who's doing a one-sided thing.
Children.
All right, there goes Whoopi. Because there's people in the audience clapping for a point she doesn't like, she calls everybody children and claps like she's some authoritative teacher over everyone else and they're so out of line because they're clapping for a point. This is the second time this happens and they just lose their mind. Look at it. Behar loves it. Stop yourselves because you're clapping for a point that she doesn't like. Nice.
That whatever outlet released it.
Let's not kid ourselves.
But the name has been out there for 5 days.
But that doesn't make it right.
But nevertheless,
But Abby, you guys, ABC is right now.
Right.
Now, one of the things that I don't think Trump and his girlfriend did well is she tries to talk over him quite a bit, and they just didn't find a good balance. So much of the time, they're both talking. So they should have communicated before and said, okay, I'm going to lead this part, you're going to lead this part. One person is just going to lead and the other person is going to kind of come in and fill when they need a little help. But I don't feel like that communication was good there. It definitely wasn't a nice 1-2 punch, in my opinion. You can see these little examples here where I don't think it was helpful to have two people, even though they were on the same side. I don't think it was executed that well.
We don't want to have a country like that. Do you understand that?
We've all done things.
The vessel or the semantics, so they tweet.
See, there he actually had to stop her himself.
Or the semantics, so they tweet. But nevertheless, look at the result.
We've all done things that we regret. I mean, if we're talking about bringing a discourse down, Joy, you've worn blackface. Whoopi,
No,
you
I
said
haven't.
that Roman Polanski.
I'm sorry, and don't. If
You
you
said
do
that
it,
Roman Polanski, it wasn't rape when he raped a child. So let's talk about serious things.
Okay, so that was the big tell right there. When he ended that line with "let's talk about serious things," it shows he didn't have some grandiose point or story. He just wanted to get those two talking points out there. Why? Because it discredits Whoopi and Behar. Just like in the court of law, anytime there's a witness who has a credible testimony, you go after their credibility by pointing out things they've done that makes you question that. It's just like when people are talking trash, right? Maybe at the workplace or your friends and family, when someone talks down to you, one of the easiest strategies you can use to put them in their place is to discredit them by making fun of them. Maybe they're wearing a little shirt that's a little bit funny or a little bit tight. And you say, oh yeah, that means a lot coming from a man with a kid-sized small shirt on. Why don't you keep it down over there? It's a classic strategy, and it's very important because if people talk down to you or make fun of you, I don't care where it is, in the workplace, in the schoolyard, with your friends and family, it lowers your status when you're not able to defend yourself and come up with quick and snappy things to come back and put them in their place so they don't want to talk down to you. I don't have time in this video to teach too much about that, but I have a separate YouTube video. You can touch or click right here, and I'll teach you an easy way. It's a system that you can always have something quick and witty to say anytime anyone tries to put you down. So you can tap right here, click if you're on a computer, and I'll walk you through that video now.